What's going on? It's your boy JLOTOTHEMAX. 6 a.m. Wednesday, Hump Day Wednesday. Really interesting week, man. Really interesting week. So much has gone on since my last video. We've successfully birthed our son, who has been a real joy. The first song that came to mind during the labor was Frankly Beverly and May's Joy and Pain, because the experience of childbirth, I was part of it, but it's not the same for the father. But even just witnessing her in her labor, there was definitely an element of pain for me, witnessing her pain that she was experiencing. But once, and it took a long time. Like, she was in, we had to change our birth plan from a home birth. We had to do it on the fly. We had a home birth plan that ended up taking longer than we wanted to, and then the pain got too unbearable to deal with. So she had to go to the hospital, and then, which alleviated a lot of the stress, but then still ended up being a bit more complicated than just that. So long story short, our baby was a pretty sizable baby, 10 pounds. So it was a little too hard to do it the normal way, so he had to come out with C-section. He also had his umbilical cord wrapped around, so it could have been really traumatic trying to force him that way. So, but he's out happy and healthy, keeping us awake at night when he wants to eat and get a diaper change. But we're really thankful and appreciative for having him in our life, although right now I'm up at 6 o'clock. It's like the time schedule is just so off. Like, my circadian rhythms are just like off. This is one of the reasons I'm out here, just like getting some proper sunrise sunlight, because apparently that's like some of the best sunlight you can get. To kind of keep your biological clock in order. But anyway, the real reason I wanted to make this, video is because I did this on my, my other social media, and it was a little bit more candid, but I wanted to address my YouTube as well. Because, I want to be, like I said in previous videos on here, I want to be more consistent about putting things up, and I want to be honest. One of the things that just, I don't want to say it was irking, well, it's just on my mind right now, is just the fervor that the Black Lives Matter protests have received, the fanfare, the energy. In a bubble, just that much energy being generated over Black Lives Matter, over the sanctity of Black lives, is a beautiful thing in a vacuum. But the way it's been realized, I don't think that it actually is truly representative of what it could be and how it could empower us. I believe that the movement, in many cases and purposes, has been co-opted by other entities, other energies, other people who really have motivations that may stray from ours, stray from Black empowerment ultimately. And a case in point to me is this monumental movement, or this monumental judgment by the Supreme Court the other day, on Monday. Now, I I believe in that. I mean, that's the irony, is that you would think that with the civil rights bill that was passed in the '60s, those civil rights protections already protected the LGBT community from discrimination at the workplace, but they had to further they had to further fight. They had to fight further to get those protections, and so they should, as they should, man. You shouldn't be fired from a job just because of your sexual orientation or your identity, whatever, however you want to describe that expression. You shouldn't be fired for that. That, I mean, quite frankly, it's none of. Quite frankly, the way I feel about it, my vibe about it is very libertarian. Like, the government, your workplace really shouldn't have this. It's really none of their fucking business, to be honest. Like, what you do at home, who you're with, it shouldn't be like. The way I feel about it is that, personally saying, like, it's really none of anyone's business, really. Like, it's the business of the people who you choose to allow to be part of it. But outside of that, it's none of anyone else's business. Who your family life, your sex life, your how you choose to express yourself in life through love. Like, that's freedom. I believe in freedom. That's a libertarian mindset. The government, in some cases, in a lot of cases, I think the government has too much control in that aspects of our lives. But on the other side of it, there does need to be some protections and civil rights protections against unfair discrimination based on a variety of things, including sexual orientation and race. But that all said, so I'm positive. I feel I have a positive outlook on what happened in that regard. However, I don't. What I feel happened was a bit undermined and a bit shady, like how that energy of the black community was really used to bring a lot of awareness to this issue. Case in point, I mean, I've seen a lot of white liberals, white LGBT people supporting the Black Lives Matter movement in the last couple of weeks. I've seen a lot. And what I found very peculiar was that on Sunday they had this big march in Brooklyn, and there was like 15,000 people out there, which was kind of wild. I actually spoke to some friends yesterday who attended, and they said, I mean, my whole thing, I was like, where's the social distancing? Like, isn't this still a thing? Like, the coronavirus, how can 15,000 people gather safely? Like, the 6-foot thing can't happen in that environment. So already that's kind of risking it. But, apparently the protests were really civil in that regard. Masks were being passed out. People were all over the place with sanitizer, wipes, and just, they were really aware about that, as aware as possible, let's say, in given the circumstance. So that's cool, but still a little bit kind of funny that can happen during this time. And that's considered woke, because a lot of the same people who were saying, let's stay socially distant, let's close everything, let's complain about businesses that stay open, let's complain about people who are having friends over, let's call the cops on them, let's call 311, which essentially is the cops, because that's a direct line that gets to the police. You're getting the authorities involved. So a lot of those same people were the same people protesting, which kind of goes against the grain of the rules that they seem to be upholding. But if it's for a bigger purpose, I get it. There's going to be some collateral damage, which is kind of hard to predict if you really believe in the severity of the disease. I mean, that collateral damage can severely outweigh, if it's as serious as they say, that collateral damage can severely outweigh even the lives, the black lives that we're trying to uphold. I mean, I'll say this as a black man. I'm like, that the collateral damage of having 15,000 people gathered in one place where, there could be one super spreader or a few of them. Imagine all those people get infected by it, then spread it to their respective communities. That could be a disaster. Millions of people could be affected by that. So, in a relatively short amount of time. So, what matters? But I don't want to get too deep into my views about that. But that all said, they were willing to break that rule to gather in support of Black Lives Matter. But what I found very interesting was that, it's Pride Month, right? And this happened with Obama, during Obama's era too. There was some really groundbreaking legislation passed. It was gay marriage passed during Pride Month in June. Which again, I'm cool with that. But I just found it very interesting how the hashtag changed from Black Lives Matter to Black Trans Lives Matter. There's a real, I feel like there's a real irony or a real hypocrisy in changing the hashtag that way. Because if Black Lives Matter, period. We're talking about Black Lives Matter. George Floyd, the most prominent. I know there should be some equality. There should be equality in the prominence of each person who got killed, getting their name out there, say their name, right? But some of the most egregious cases of unarmed black men, unarmed black people dying at the hands of police brutality, and overt shows of force. They've been black men, black men, as they would say, cisgender, heterosexual black men at the hands of those, like George Floyd. His name really generated all of this energy, right? I mean, he was the straw that broke the camel's back. So it's not just him, but he was the tipping point that really got everything popping as far as this global movement, right? That really brought this energetic movement into the top of the mind of the damn world, turning everyone up, right? So, if that's the case, why do you need to change it? Then why do you have to take, remember, we're using all of the energy that was drummed up by all of these people who were killed. Not just trans, not just gay, not just LGBT, not just straight, all of them. Black is the defining it's the defining descriptor in that hashtag. Black lives, right? But then you put trans lives to kind of serve this agenda. What I think that actually does is that it separates us. So basically you're saying, I'm separate. So now you're saying, you're actually putting an emphasis on this trans person's life, even though it's part of this whole collective. Black Lives Matter is necessarily inclusive of black transgenders. necessarily inclusive of black lesbians, black bisexuals, black gays, black queers, black plus. However, black, however you want to identify and describe your sexuality. If you're black, you're black. It's black first, right? So what I feel like they did was they added that trans to it to kind of take some of the attention away from the black, right? Because then it pits this difference between people in the black community. So if you're not LGBT, then you can't, because you can, the LGBT, the T in the LGBT can identify with the rest of the LGBT because they're all considered queer, you know, right? So it's like the heterosexual and then the queer, right? So there's this difference by putting that word in there, right? Essentially, to me, like saying black trans lives, you might as well just say black LGBT lives matter. That's the same thing, right? But what that does is that allows anyone else who identifies as LGBT, if they're not black, to kind of latch onto that, right? And that's great, you know, because we need other people to identify with our issues to support us. Fine. But what I think that does, again, is that takes the energy that was generated by real pain, real suffering. People's lives were lost. That pain is now able to go and transfer outside of the black, just this defining descriptor, black. That pain and the energy that was drummed up by all this pain and suffering and anger and awareness and however you want to describe it, now has an opportunity by putting this word in there to go out and support another's agenda. And this is where the black matters. Because what about, we're talking about LGBT, what about Ed Buck? This dude, this wealthy Democratic donor who has some questionable things going on in his home with black men, gay black men, ended up overdose, dying. You know, there was a last one, he had like 2 or 3 men that was questionably found in some methamphetamine overdoses or something like that. I think it was meth. And then there was another one who he ended up in the hospital. He didn't die, luckily. But nobody's talking about that. But he's white. He's LGBT. There are plenty of examples of racism that occurs within the LGBT community. I know this firsthand from friends who are black LGBT who have talked about experiences that they've had, racist experiences they've had by other fellow members in the LGBT who weren't black, right? So that's where that actually is, that description, that divisive description of trans, which you could, how I've already described it, you could essentially put in LGBT in lieu of trans. That's where that gets problematic, because Black Lives Matter talks about racism, right? That's the key identifier that makes this whole movement important, right? We're protecting black lives, right? So the racism that the LGBT can impose on black people can necessarily contribute to unnecessary shows of force, unnecessary police brutality against black people. A white gay person can get that heat on me. A white lesbian can do the same. Hell, a white transgender can do the same, right? That race matters. That's the point. But see, when you start putting all these other things in there, then you kind of water it up, and then you make it easier to kind of dissipate it, right? if this makes it real simple. The hypocrisy is real simple to explain in this. If you Some people complain about, oh, they're like, all lives matter, right? And so people say, oh my God, it's like wrong of you to say all lives matter because we're trying to focus on black lives, right? I understand that point. I believe all lives matter ultimately. We're all equal under the eyes of the Lord, right? But we're humans. We're social animals, so we don't all have that spirit, you know. So we do have to delineate these things. But those people who are complaining about all lives matter being used as a kind of a retort to Black Lives Matter, they should, if they're going to use that same logic, they should also complain about anyone saying black trans lives matter, black lesbians lives matter, black gay lives matter. That should also be a problem, because what you're doing is you're actually making it, you're basically saying all lives matter in a really sneaky way, right? If it's Black Lives Matter, it should just be Black Lives Matter, period. Because otherwise, I should be able to say black straight black heterosexual men lives matter, right? But but if I say that, then I'm probably, out of everyone in the black community, I'm gonna get attacked for that. I mean, case in point, there was an article, I believe it was in the Root a few years ago, talking about straight black men are the white people of black people, which was really problematic in my mind. The way that, first of all, just writing like salacious headline like that just to get eyeballs on your article. I mean, if you actually read it, there were some valid points, but you just really had to throw people under the throw straight black men under the bus like that to get a headline, right? But what if I did that? So we already have somewhat of a reputation, right? So you're dividing us. And what that does is, once you divide, again, divide and conquer, once you divide people like that, it allows other entities outside of that community to come in, swoop in, and take advantage. And I feel like that always happens to us. The black community, we always do that shit. We always divided. We're always infighting. There's like, if you go on black Twitter, there's always some kind of infighting, all types of bullshit. And we really don't really get anything done as a result of that. And I think that as a community, we really got to stick together. We kind of have to have a concerted agenda, a concerted expression of who we are and what we want to really make it happen. And there has to be it kind of has to be a little bit bulletproof, because if it's not bulletproof, then what people can come in and swoop in and cut us up, and then we just don't, then all that energy is for naught, or it gets used by someone else. I mean, case in point, I brought up this whole thing with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, on the same day, they were also looking at the qualified immunity protection that these police pretty much can employ, and that actually greatly contributes to some of the problems that we deal with unnecessary police activity, unnecessary police brutality. There was a case that was presented to the Supreme Court that really questioned the validity of that qualified immunity, and could have potentially really brought some protection and equality for everyone, because this is not just a black issue. This is just police in general. So, everybody could potentially benefit from this. This is this is like constitutional rights issue. This is like constitutional law issue. So that affects everybody. The qualified immunity, questioning it would actually have allowed everybody to benefit if they changed the laws, because everyone's affected by this immunity that police often walk with. They walk with that in mind. They walk with the knowledge that they're not likely to be punished in an equitable way for some of the infractions they put on the citizens they're swear to serve and protect, right? They walk with this feeling of, above the law, right? This immunity that they won't be sued. Their families won't be sued. Their future won't be sued. They don't have to worry about paying these civil suits. The taxpayers will pay for it, right? Think about that. Like, you can murder somebody without impunity, essentially, right? And all these millions of dollars that sometimes these victims, the families of the victims of police brutality, might get in a civil suit. The cops who do it, they don't actually pay that. It's the taxpayers paying that. But see, this is what this case was actually supposed to kind of put into light and question. But nobody, I haven't seen many people say anything about it. Like, a lot of these people, these so-called woke progressive people, I'm not seeing them say anything about it, And that's what I mean. Like, our energy could be better served really constricting it to a certain purview that really affects our reality, as opposed to just sharing it far and wide and not really having an agenda, a concerted, agenda about it. So, anyway, I know I'm going off my soapbox right now, but guard your grill out there, yo. I feel like this, we saw what's going on this week, the black community is dealing with a lot of heat right now, and this is just June. You know what I mean? It's like this week, like, we already talking, there's like three people they found questionable deaths with, like, hanging. They're saying it was suicide, but really? Like, we got to question everything at this point. Were those lynchings? You know what I'm saying? This guy, another police brutality, a guy running away, getting shot. Even a Black Lives Matter activist, questionable death. What are we celebrating right now when this stuff is going on? And this is what I mean. Like, we generated all this energy, all of this worldwide. I'm seeing protests in Berlin, in Africa, all over the world. But what is it actually affecting here? And that's the thing. It's like, sometimes it's about, as they say, the faith as concerted in one accord as a mustard seed to move a mountain. It's not always about this big mass to make it happen. Sometimes, the 300, what was that? The Spartans, the 300, just like the elite, the Marines, like, there's this, like, these warrior spirits that are just, like, on one accord that make it happen. I feel like that's how we have to kind of operate, with our goals, with our agendas, to change things, But that's just me, yo. That's just me. But yo, man, vibes is back, as my fellow Gemini Kanye West famously said during his 2016 rant in San Francisco in his concert, where he went off the rails, quote unquote, and came back even stronger. The vibes is back. It's heating up too, man. The summertime this weekend, Father's Day, it's gonna be summer solstice. And next month will be the dog days, the rise of Sirius, man. We gotta watch out. We gotta watch out, man. This is gonna be a crazy summer. If our year already started like this, 2020, you know the dog days. July, August, September, October, November. Jason. You know it's gonna be hot. So just be prepared. But anyway, yo. One love to everybody, yo. Y'all take care, alright? Peace.